Hello and welcome to episode number 286 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. I tried to change the enunciation. How did I do? Or the cadence.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. It keeps people on their toes.
It's like you never know what word I'm going to mispronounce.
That's right. Exactly.
I am Kellen, joined by Mark, the Green Tank.
Just the two of us.
Say something.
Oh, hey. Okay.
What? And that's it.
Yeah.
And this is where we go. Wah, wah.
Well, as is our tradition, every episode that starts with the number 2, we just have 2 tanks on them. So.
What are you making up traditions for? Why have I never heard of one of our traditions?
We've taped a bunch of episodes without your knowledge, Kellen. I hate to break it to you.
That would be sad.
That would be sad if we did that.
If there were episodes I had no knowledge of, I would be upset about that.
You listen to every episode, so there's no way we could get that by you, right?
That's true. I listen to every episode multiple times. It's like what I want to do on my drive to work is listen to you laughing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
At things Nealon says. Today on the podcast, we are going to be answering some of your questions about 2-player games, edible board games, and more.
Woo!
But before we do that, woo! Oh, I like woo.
Yeah.
Like a little...
Pumping the crowd up. You got to do some crowd work.
Yeah. It is hard without 3. 3 is so good, right? Because 2 people are having a conversation, 1 person is lobbing bombs in there.
Yeah.
You know, just like the fanfare, the like sizzle, the spice.
Yeah.
With 2, it's tougher.
Less bomb throwing, less sizzle.
Yeah, and I feel like I have to fill the silence, so I just say more stupid shit. But before we get to the stupid shit, Mark will be talking to us about...
Power and Weakness and the Star Wars deck-building game.
And then I'll be talking about Haggis, an upcoming and beloved 2-player ladder climbing game. Never say trick-taking when you mean ladder climbing, Mark. That is a rule with those people.
They will come down on you.
Mark, why don't you kick us off by talking about Power and Glory?
All right, so I'll take you back to the past. I got a chance to play an older 2-player area control game from the one and only Andreas Steding. He of the great Hansa Teutonica. Ever heard of it, Kellen? You ever play Hansa Teutonica?
I have heard of it. I liked it. I noted it. I got into the club. Here we are.
Here we are. So this game's from 2007. It's published by JKLM Games, that powerhouse of publishing. You a big JKLM fan? What's your favorite JKLM game release, Kellen?
What are you talking about?
JKLM
Games.
Going. Okay. Anyway.
No one has ever heard of this company.
So, well, Andre Steding did when he signed up with them to release his game called Power and Weakness. Though I have to say...
Oh, I was close.
I have to say that I love the German title way, way more. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but it's called Macht and Ohnmacht. I love that. Sounds so powerful and solemn. Macht and Ohnmacht. So, Power and Weakness, or as I will refer to it, hopefully throughout the rest of this description, Macht and Ohnmacht, is, as I said, one of the rare 2-player only area control games. I don't really know what the theme is, aside from Machting and Ohnmachting, but basically you're fighting over England. And this is the England of Merlin and magic, though maybe the theme doesn't necessarily shine through. Anyway, as I said, you're going to start with this map of England, which is going to be divided into a number of sections. And on each of these sections, you're going to randomly assign a colored chip. So you'll have some green areas, blue areas, red areas, whatever. You also start with 4 cubes on the timer portion of the board. And on your turn, you're going to take 2 actions comprising of 4 different possibilities. So first, nice and easy, what you can do is you can place one of your pieces, either a disc or a cube, more about that later, anywhere on the board in an effort to take control of an area. So far, are you with me? You can either do place a cube down, place a disc down. That's how the area control sort of is established. Pretty straightforward.
Is that mocked or ohnmacht?
I think that is probably Machting. That's probably the power part. I think you're more of an Ohnmacht weakness guy, if I had to say. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is you can take one of these action tiles that is on the offer row. You don't have to pay anything, but you just take a tile, no hand limit, nice and easy. More about the tiles a little bit later. So that's 2 of the 4 things you can do. Place a piece out, take a tile. You can also add more units from your reserve, which is inaccessible and move them into your supply, which is accessible to you. Think of games like El Grande, where you have like I forget if it's called like a province and a supply. So you have a set of cubes and discs that you don't have access to, and then you have to pull them into your supply to have access to them. That's another thing you can do, is sort of take units from your reserve into your supply. However, there are two interesting things about this specific action. But before I describe it further, let's talk about one of the main aspects of the game, which is the two phases. And you know how much I love games with two phases, mocked and unmocked, two phases. So two phases in the game, there's the magic phase and the might phase. This is not might and magic, but it's got a might phase and a magic phase.
I'm looking at pictures of this, and there's no way this game has a magic and might phase.
It's got like a wizard's hat.
There's no might and magic happening.
There's both. I will tell you how both might and magic is happening. You're going to start in the magic phase. Once you have completed that round, you're going to switch to the might phase and so on. So one round is going to be magic, the next is going to be might, so on and so forth until the game ends. The main thing that sets these phases apart is that in the might phase, your strength in a region is primarily made up of the number of cubes you have in it. And adjacency during the might phase is determined in the normal way, where like if one segment is bordering another, they're adjacent. That's the might phase. You're looking at cubes, you're looking at borders. In the magic phase, your strength is determined by the discs you have out. And adjacency has nothing to do with borders. Instead, it has to do with the colors that the regions have been randomly assigned at the beginning of the game. So 3 regions might be in different corners of the board, but if they're all blue, if they're all randomly assigned blue, and you're in the magic phase, they're all adjacent. So you're trying to pull discs into your supply or cubes into your supply to be able to place more of them out. But when you take that refill action I mentioned, you only get to add pieces of the phase you're not in. So if you're working in the might phase and you're using cubes during that phase and you take this refill action, you're refilling the discs that you can use during the magic phase. If you're in the magic phase and you do the refill action, you're refilling cubes. In addition, whenever you take a refill action, you're also discarding one of those time cubes that I mentioned. You start with 4 on the board, and if you take a refill action, you discard one of them. Once all those time cubes are used, that's how the round ends. So you sort of are controlling the speed of the round. So those are the 3 of the 4 actions. Place a piece on the board, take one of these tiles that have actions on them, or refill. Okay. The final thing you can do is play one of those tiles that you previously have picked up. So some of the tiles will give you slightly special abilities or let you immediately take more cubes or discs, but the vast majority of the tiles simply are matching the colors that are on the board. And by playing them, that's the only way that you battle for a location. So for example, if you want to take over your opponent's spot and the spot is in a blue region of the board, in order to have a battle there, you have to play a blue tile. The way you determine who wins the battle is you see how many of the current type of piece, so cubes in the might phase, discs in the magic phase, that you have surrounding that spot versus how many of that same piece your opponent has surrounding it, plus all their units, regardless of type, in the location you're fighting over. So let me just clarify that. So say you're in the might phase and the cubes are what you're working with. You pick the area you're fighting, you count all of your cubes surrounding that spot, you count all of your opponent's cubes surrounding that spot, and then in the actual spot you're fighting for, you count all of your opponent's cubes and discs. So whatever location you're fighting over, they get all of those to count for them. You compare the numbers, and if you have the most, you win, you take it over, and your opponent gets kicked out, and a lot of his pieces get thrown back into his reserve. Taking this action, which is an action you can do quite often in the game, also spends one of those time cubes that I mentioned. So it's another way to like get towards the end of a round. Once all of those timing cubes have been used up, the round ends, and you see who's leading in the most regions based on the phase you're in. So if you're in the might phase, you see who's leading with the most cube control. Magic, you look at the most disc control. Whoever is leading in the most regions gets 1 permanent point. And then you add up the number of regions that you are currently leading in and all the permanent points you have for each player. And if anybody has exceeded 12, you win. So that means that if you're losing, again, the game ends at 12. But let's say it's like Kellen has 8 points and I have 6 points, and I win that round. I get 1 permanent point. But what you also do is you also count the number of regions you won in that round. And if my current permanent score plus those regions meets or exceeds 12, you can win immediately. So you can bank on 1 big round to sort of push you ahead and take an instant win, basically. After one of those rounds is done, and you've determined if there's a winner, you flip a new timer tile, which tells you how many of those timing cubes there'll be that round. So again, at the start of the game, you start with these 4 timing cubes. So you know, like once 4 of those actions that uses a timing cube has been done, the round's going to end. But the next round, there might be 5 timing cubes or 6 or 7. So you can have rounds of various lengths, and that sort of determines how you're going to play around. There's more to it. And actually, here's where I'll mention one of the things that I didn't really love about the game is that there are a relatively large amount of rules. Now, it sounds like pretty bite-sized. There's only 4 things you have to worry about. But specifically, there's a decent amount of like special exceptions for given circumstances. So in our game, we found ourselves consulting the rule book pretty regularly. The answers are always there. You can always find the answers. But you definitely, at least we definitely needed to consult it for like these edge cases that came up to us. That said, I really did like the game all in all, especially, and unsurprisingly, the 2 phases aspect. It's sort of hard to wrap your mind around how much your board state changes from one phase to the other. So one round, you're focused on cubes, you're focused on how your regions are bordering each other, like physically on the map, and then all of a sudden we're in the next phase, and now you're looking at the discs, and borders don't count anymore, you're just looking at colors. And the fact that you can only prepare for one type in the opposite round is also really, really great. I didn't mention this, but sometimes those tiles that come up that you can acquire, you actually have to do a blind bid for. And whenever you do these blind bids, you use the current type of piece. So if you're in a cube phase and you're blind bidding for a tile, you bid with the cubes you're using. And that becomes such a huge decision because however many cubes you give up during the cube phase, you know you're not going to be able to replenish that in that phase. And you're like, it's such a precious resource. Because if you're out of the type of piece you need, there's like no way to come up with more.
It's like, I don't know that I can think of an area control game where adjacency changes based on the round that you're in.
Yeah, I can't think of one either. I'm sure, or I assume it.
I'm sure it exists.
Yeah.
But that makes for some crazy things to think about. The forward planning, like I know you said it as a positive, but the idea that you can only place, you said you can only place pieces for the upcoming round and not the round that you're in?
No,
or something like that?
You can only place pieces for the round you're in. So if we're in the cube phase, you only place cubes there, but you can't get more cubes in that phase. You can only get more discs in that phase. So like basically you can like replenish your stock in the off phase.
Yeah, I gotcha. So, I mean, my first thought when you're describing it was that you're about to say that you loved it. Like it was like a 10 out of 10 banger. It sounds a little like Blitzkrieg, a little bit like in Palo Mori, sort of just like the shorter, but there's a lot going on here. But it sounds like there's enough rules exceptions that are kind of annoying.
Yeah, that's the
that
one
prevent
thing
it from being 11 out of 10 certified banger.
Right, exactly. I think that's what it was. Again, I think maybe with more plays, it would rise in my estimation, and I am interested in playing it again. The whole thing about timing changing from round to round, so like you can really sort of bulk yourself up in one round getting ready for the next, and then you flip the tile and all of a sudden you know there's only like 4 timing cubes, and you know, oh, I've got to like really put my stuff out on the board immediately or my opponent might rush the round. Alternatively, you can really like bulk yourself up, get a lot of pieces for the next phase, and then the tile flips and it's like 7 timing cubes or 8 timing cubes, and you know there's going to be a long round ahead of you and you can play a longer game. That can also lead to some, I guess, luck situations where you're not prepared for a long round or whatever, but that's something you can maybe account for if you played it more. But yeah, just a lot of considerations. The way the board state changes dramatically, and you've got to keep an eye on that because you'll often, at least in my limited experience, find yourself in a position where like, okay, yeah, I'm really, really taking advantage of this round, but you often are doing that at the expense of being weak in the following phase. You know, it's sort of ebbs and flows.
Well, and that's the one thing I was curious about, because the sort of product copy, which again, this game is old as so, you know, this product copy is many years old, but is that it's sort of like, should you focus on magic control or should you focus on military control or try to be equally good in both?
Right.
You know, like, do you think it'd be possible to just be like the world's best magician in mocked and unmocked and like completely ignore swordplay?
Right. That is the question. I wish Neelan was here as a resident magician to answer that question. But yeah, I think it's going to come down to the tile draw, because another interesting thing is like the way I said, like, you can only start a battle if you have the color tile in your hand. And you can be in a situation where, like, there was a part in the game where I had a blue area and I was worried about it. But then I realized, like, there was no blue tiles that my opponent could pick up. And I didn't think he had any blue tiles in his hand from previous rounds. And the market didn't have any blue tiles. So I'm like, okay, if he doesn't have any blue tiles yet and he can't pick up any in this round, I know that spot is safe. So it's like even another consideration and also another aspect of luck that may turn some people off. But so it's going to depend on the market. It's also going to depend on how those colors are arranged randomly at the beginning of the game. Like, if the colors sort of coincide with the borders and then the differentiation between the magic adjacency and the might adjacency isn't so big, then maybe you can try to, like, play both sides. But if, like, things are all over the place, maybe you have to take either the one side or the other. So a lot of interesting considerations to be made there. It's like almost if this game was refined a little bit more and you could take those edge cases out. I haven't even considered what you might do to do that. But if you could clean up a little bit, I think it'd be really, really excellent. It has a little bit of, and this is maybe partially because the map looks so similar, the King is Dead sort of feeling where it's like a very tight area control game. It's not nearly as tight as the King is Dead, but sort of those feelings. I think I might even like this one more just because it is a little bit looser. But yeah, just a good game for sure.
King is Dead is overrated. You heard it here.
Yeah, I know that's your...
Send all your hate mail to Mark Basada.
Your seated position.
BoardGameBarrage.com.
But anyway, that is Power and Weakness, or Mocked and Omocked, by Andreas Stedding and JKLM Games. We love you, JKLM.
Why don't you play games that have come out in the last 10 years?
Well, I will. I'll be talking about one that's come out practically within the last month, so just you wait.
All right. The game that I want to talk about is Haggis, which I don't know what...
Is that from 2023?
That's from... 2010.
Okay.
With a new Kickstarter on the way. Okay. This is a beloved ladder climbing game. Many people talk about it. It's sort of like, okay, if you have this player count, you're playing Teach You. If you have 2 players, you're playing Haggis. And it's sort of always been on the shelf of shame as a game that I have never played. And in anticipation for the new version that is coming out on Kickstarter from the Portland Game Collective, Mark and I decided to play a few games of Haggis. Haggis is a ladder climbing game, not to be confused with trick-taking. In a trick-taking game, you play 1 card, Mark, and then the winner of the trick is determined. In a ladder climbing game, you can keep playing cards as long as they're better and better until someone says, "Mercy, I'm out." And then you get to do it again.
I wish you'd explain that to me before we started playing.
Yeah, exactly.
I was playing way off.
Haggis is a lot like Teach You, if you've ever played it. And those say, but it's not like Teach You. It's like Big 2 or whatever the hell games these are all based off of. Essentially, you're playing sets and sequences, a set being a group of cards of the same rank, like 777 or the Devil's Number 666, as Mark Posada played in our game.
As often as I could.
Or a sequence, which is consecutive numbers 8, 9, 10, or like pairs like 7, 7, 8, 8, where the 7 and 8 are both from consecutive suits together. And so the way that this one works is once someone plays 2 cards, right, a 7, 7, the only thing you can do is play 2 cards, but you must play something higher than that. And so these cards go up to 10, 2 to 10, and then each player starts each round with 3 wild cards, a jack, a queen, and a king. And those are able to be subbed in anywhere within a normal hand of cards. And so you might start the game, you're looking at your hand, and you're like, should I play my pair of 9s, or should I try to use those 9s in a run that I have going on, or should I combine them with the wilds and do 7, 8, 9? So there's a lot of sort of decision making that you're doing, more decision making, I would say, than in a normal game of this type of genre, because the game also has bombs. So the concept of a bomb is that essentially you can win a trick by playing a bomb, but you don't get any of the points from the cards that you use to bomb it. So it's a way to use your wild cards to bomb the hell out of the trick. You win, you get to start the next one, but you don't get any of the points for doing that. And that's a combination of all of your wild cards, Jack Queen, Jack King, Jack Queen King, in a series of escalating orders, because the one thing that can happen is when someone pulls out a bomb, the other person can pull out a bigger bomb.
Which is what I did to you repeatedly.
I was going to say it's on sort of geopolitical.
I was going to say it's a comment on my bigger bomb.
I just don't get why you always want to talk about how big your bomb is, Mark. I just don't understand.
I'm compensating.
It's an all-ages program.
I'm compensating.
Geopolitical ramifications of everything, and you're over here going, like, I bombed you, nah, with my big bomb.
Big bomb.
All right. Get it together, Mark. The game also features bidding, which allows you to bid 5, 15, 30 points to say that you're going to go out of cards first. Going out of cards first is definitely the best way to score points. You score points for every card in the tricks that you win, but you also score 5 points per card for every card that's in your opponent's hand when you go out, in addition to winning your bid and your opponent's bid, in addition to winning the Haggis, which is a couple of leftover points. There's a lot of ways to score points. There's also, unfortunately, variance as to how the game scores. The newer, simpler scoring is just 1 point per card versus an older style system that inevitably seems like it breaks down to the same thing, but I haven't played both ways, so I can't really comment on that. Mark, what did you think of Haggis?
I really liked it. I don't have extensive experience with these ladder climbing games like Tichu or Chimera, which are the two that I've played. And Tichu is, I think, exclusively a 4-player game, a team 4-player game, and Chimera is exclusively a 3-player game. I know Haggis is, people say it's best at 2, but it can also be played at 3. But I thought it was a great 2-player version of these games. These ladder climbing games generally come down to trying to figure out when to take the initiative and be able to sort of lead and know you're going to run your cards out before your opponent can answer. And the flexibility that those wild cards give you, like everybody starts with 3 wild cards every round, so you know that you're going to have flexibility every round. And the trade-off of using those wild cards to, play a bomb, which while it gives you the initiative for the next round, it gives your opponent points immediately, is a nice trade-off. I found myself often trying to decide, do I need to take the initiative now and take it away from Kellen and try to run out my hand, or can I let him have these points now, have this victory now, keeping in mind if I don't do a bomb, I get more flexibility later, and maybe I can use a bomb later to snatch a win out from under him at the last second. I thought it was filled with a lot of really cool decisions.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm looking through the games that are called ladder climbing games, just to see so Scout is the number 1 ranked one, which is interesting to consider it that way, which I know you have played. Then Tichu, Haggis, Great Dalmoody, another game that I've played since childhood. Llama, Delt, right? Custom Heroes, Mask Men, Chimera. Lectio is one that I have, which is actually, it's all the Bakelite tiles. I have that cool one. Clubs, which was unfortunately too much a few years back. Hungry Monkey, which I know people have been talking about. Vampire Queen, another one that I have sitting on my Self of Shame. 535 is a good game. British City Poker is fine. So this is an underrepresented area within trick-taking games. So I wonder if will ladder climbing games get their own renaissance, Mark? Is this the start?
Yeah, I mean,
of a new era.
It seems like it's a ripe field. After like you said, the explosion of trick-taking games, it makes sense that they would just move on to another.
And I'm spitballing, and again, never spitball with these communities because they will come out. But I wonder if a ladder climbing game gives you the opportunity to just up more.
Interesting.
Because in a trick-taking game, you can only play 1 card, so how much you can up your hand could be limited to 1 card. Where this game, it's you have more opportunity to play a combination that is just going to ruin the rest of your game.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. You have more control over whether you limp into a round or go big, whereas with a trick taker, you're limited.
Yeah, especially in must follow, right?
Yes, right. Game. Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah.
I thought this was really good. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I could see Christina and I giving it a go. I will be backing the Kickstarter, which was the purpose of Mark and I trying it. So should I back this Kickstarter, or should I calm down, Kellen? You have enough card games. But we've learned today that, in fact, that's not true. I don't have enough ladder climbing games.
That's right.
There's not that many. They're a dying breed.
That's right.
Need to support ladder climbing.
Exactly.
Mark, take us to the year 2023 and tell us about another game that you played.
All right, we're finally up to date. Finally, I'm the person, as always, to lead us into the modern hip times, as the kids call it, I'm sure. So yes, a little blast from the past back to when they used to sponsor us, but I went to my local Target and picked up the new Star Wars: the deck building game by Fantasy Flight. Fantasy Flight or JKLM? Which publisher do you prefer, Kellen? I know those are two heavyweights in your eyes.
Why are you going to Target and just buying every Star Wars product you see?
I felt bad because they used to be such a big sponsor. I felt like I could, talk to Mr. Target and tell him, hey, can you send me some of these games? And those days are gone now.
Buying them.
Yeah, I got to go and pay my own money to buy this. But anyway, so Star Wars: the deck building game by Fantasy Flight, designed by Caleb Grace, who's the designer of the Lord of the Rings: the card game, and also the excellent Marvel Champions: the card game. So a man who has plenty of experience with highly regarded. I was going to use that colon joke, but I appreciate that you did. But in addition to colon knowledge, he also has experience with well-regarded card games and with integrating much beloved IP into them. So Star Wars: the deck building game takes place during the first three movies as chronologically released in the theater. So I'm talking New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and all that stuff. And in it, you'll be taking either the side of the Rebellion or the Empire. As it is a deck builder, if you're familiar with that type of game, you already know much of what's going to be going on. For those who aren't familiar with that type of game, basically, you're going to be starting with a pretty weak, paltry deck, some of which are worth currency, some of which do damage, and through the course of the game, you're going to be acquiring stronger and stronger cards, which will make your deck more powerful as you attempt to win the game, which, in the case of Star Wars, is done by destroying 3 of your opponent's bases. So that's how you win the game. You destroy 3 of your opponent's bases. As I said, for those who know deck builders, much of this is going to be already acquired knowledge, but you'll perhaps even be more familiar with this game if you've played Star Realms, a game that this game is occasionally compared with. And in fact, when I was teaching the game, my opponent, Cameron, said, oh, this is like Star Realms, so from the horse's mouth. So let's talk about what sets this game apart and what makes it similar to other deck builders, particularly Star Realms. As I said, your goal in the game is going to be trying to destroy 3 of your opponent's bases. Each player will start with a vanilla starting base with 8 hit points each. But one of the cool things about the game is that after your first base is destroyed, you get to look through your remaining bases. So you're going to have like a pack of bases, and you get to look through them and pick whatever planet you want to be your next base. And all of them have different hit points. Many of them have different powers, so that's sort of cool. The way that you damage your opponent's base is by playing cards that deal damage. So in addition to the bases, again, which is your target, you can also deal damage to a couple other things. One of them being capital ships, which will be where Star Realms players are going to see the closest relationship to that game. Capital ships in this game are similar to, I think they were called bases in Star Realms. So capital ships, which are, again, another type of card, are a type of card that you acquire, and when you put them into play, they both act as a buffer to your opponent, so they have to like blow up your capital ship before they can start doing damage to your base. But also, many of them are going to give you a passive ability or some sort of benefit. So that's another type of thing that you can attack. The last thing you can attack with your damage dealing cards has to do with one of the more novel aspects of the game, which are some of the cards in the market row. So the market row are the cards that you and your opponent can buy from. However, these cards come in 3 types. There are Rebel cards, think cards like Luke Skywalker and Chewbacca. There are Empire cards, which are like Darth Vader, or there are neutral cards. Now, either side can buy the neutral cards, but only the Rebel side can buy the Rebel cards, and only the Empire player can buy the Empire cards. However, you can destroy your opponent's cards right from the market row before they even get a chance to buy them. And so when these cards come out into the market row, they're oriented toward the player who can buy them. So if like Princess Leia comes out, it's oriented toward the Rebel player. But at the bottom of the card, oriented toward the opposite player, is that card's health and what you get if you blow them up. So that's an interesting thing I'd never seen before in a deck builder that I thought was pretty cool. Finally, you can't have a Star Wars game without the Force, and it takes the form of a track that you play tug of war with your opponent on. If you ever are able to pull the Force all the way to your side, you start every round with an extra resource. But perhaps more importantly, there are a number of cards that you can have in your deck that are going to, when you play them, if you have the Force on your side, will give you extra benefits. So that's another reason to have the Force on your side. That's basically it. And while that might have sounded like a lot, one of the things I really appreciated about this game, as opposed to power and weakness was how simple it was to teach. It definitely helps if you've played deck builders before, but even if you haven't, this is really pretty straightforward. Feels like the perfect game to introduce to someone who might not be into board or card games, but does love Star Wars. I think it would be a pretty easy sell and a pretty easy rules explanation. Part of the reason it's so easy to teach and play is that it's not the most innovative game in the world, but where it does iterate, I do like it. Again, blasting opponent cards out of the card row is something I know some games have done before, but I enjoyed it. I'd not seen it before in a deck builder. As I also did, I like the ability to pick a base after one of mine had been blown up. It's sort of like gives you this mid-game choice that you have to sort of assess where you are to try to figure out which base to put out next. Are you situated in a way where a particular base is going to give you the most benefit? So I thought that was a cool decision to make. Even that whole like force tug of war thing made for some interesting decisions when I knew my deck sort of had a number of cards which excelled when I had the force on my side.
But divorce from the IP is this, because Star Realms is good and Shards of Infinity is even better.
Right.
Have you played Shards of Infinity?
I have not played Shards of Infinity. Is it similar to Star Realms?
Yeah.
Okay. So
in the same realm. And there's an app, so you could play the app. So you don't even need someone else. You just play with yourself.
That's true. With my big bomb. No, so yeah, I wish I had played Shards of Infinity because I know it is very, very highly regarded, and if it's like Star Realms, I wish I had knowledge of it to, compare and contrast it. But even divorced of the IP, I mean, I like Star Wars fine. I'm not like a big Star Wars fan. Like I don't think I watched.
Keep buying all the games from Target.
That's true, but
you bought the Risk game like 2 months ago.
The Star Wars Risk game?
Star Wars Pandemic game.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But I did that for the show. Not for my love.
No, it's all for us.
I didn't watch.
It's all for you.
I didn't watch the last Star Wars in the theater. I have not watched it yet, and so don't say anything, Kellen. I don't even know if you have watched it.
You're talking about episode 9?
Yeah, episode 9. I have not watched it. Although I watched 8 and 7 in theaters, but for some reason I dropped off on 9. Anyhow, so I'm not a big Star Wars fan because I would have definitely seen it by now. You would have thought. Even putting that aside, I did like this. I liked it. It's not a game that I'll play over and over again, but it's a really quick deck builder that is easy to describe to people and lends like a lot of interesting choices. Again, where it does iterate, I think it's done well. It's relatively cheap. It's in a relatively small box, but one that is probably still too big for the components, actually, though I'm sure it's going to be filled with expansions in the not too distant future. That said, I definitely think you're going to have fun with it, even without the expansions, particularly if you're a fan of deck builders or the Star Trek. See, Star Trek. I didn't even say Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
leave that in. Leave that in.
So
Engagement.
that is Star Wars: Deck Building Game by Caleb Grace and Fantasy Flight Games. I liked it. I would recommend it.
Yeah, it is cool. It's like the IP games just keep getting better and better, it feels like.
That is great.
It's like the low bar of just quality is like gone.
Yeah.
It does make me it's like good enough though. It's like, I don't know, is it worth your time?
Yeah.
No, it's like good enough.
I think this does clear the bar. I think this is not just a good use of IP. I think this is like
It's like put a paper bag over Darth Vader's head, and is it still good enough?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because like when the Darth Vader card came out in our game, it was like a moment. Like even though like neither of us was big Star Wars fans,
you're being had. You're smiling. I can tell.
But it's like
you saw one look at Darth Vader with the paper bag over his head, and you're smiling like a schoolgirl.
I mean, but it was cool that it was like the powerful card that came out was Darth Vader as opposed to like Troll Elf or something like that. It made it like more impactful, even for two non-Star Wars fans. So yeah,
non-Star Wars fans seen 8 out of 9 in theaters.
No, I didn't see the first. How old do you think I am? Well, don't answer that question because I
don't know.
The first
I don't
one
know when A New Hope came out. I never saw that
mid-70s.
bad movie.
Yeah,
I prefer The Phantom Menace.
I did buy tickets for The Phantom Menace. It was the one time I've ever slept in line to get tickets.
Oh wow!
I was in college
for The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Menace.
Little Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, that was a big disappointment. Big disappointment. Man, I remember. This is a tangent, but God, when the Star Wars Episode 1 trailers came out, that was such a massive thing. And then to have the movie be so...
It's so funny because like I was 10, I think, or 11 when Phantom Menace came out. And loved it.
Oh, did you really?
Loved the whole thing. Oh yeah, like I was 10. Like what do you?
Yeah.
What do you mean? There's the pod race.
Yeah.
The Duel of the Fates with and they're like.
isn't the whole like big complaint about it like the fact that it's so talky, it's so diplomatic, and there's like not much action? But I guess it was enough action for a little Kellen.
I was pretentious as a 10-year-old.
Okay. The trade routes and all that stuff really hooked you in. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So you haven't changed.
Trading on Coruscant. Okay. Before we jump into the featured topic of this episode, we did want to say that we are most likely, cannot confirm asterisk, but most likely all attending PAX Unplugged 2023 in beautiful Philadelphia in December.
Can't wait to put another cheesesteak in my coat.
Yeah, that was weird when you did that.
That was it holds up. It travels well, I'll say that.
It's not for content. Mark just does these things. But I am currently exploring Airbnbs for us all to stay at. That's going to be the hippest, coolest spot in all of Philadelphia for December 1st through December 4th or whatever. I don't know the dates, to be honest with you, but I'm still looking. No, that would be fun. We'd love to see you there. We'll do more formal stuff and get some kind of meetup going, and look for more information on that in the future. And now let's jump into it, Mark. We have a website, and at that website, you can go to boardgamebarrage.com / what is it?
Topics.
/topics. Boardgamebarrage.com /topics, and suggest things to us. And what we thought we'd do today is some of you are better at topic ideas than others. Just going to be real honest, okay? And so we can't do all of them as full episodes because they can't bear the burden. They can't hit the quality bar of what it takes to be a full episode.
Are you bashing the people whose questions we're going to use in about 5 minutes from now?
Well, I don't know who they are.
As long as they're nameless and faceless, you don't care.
Well, someone asked us what the most edible board game component is.
Yeah.
Mark.
That's a whole episode.
That's not even first, so I'm ruining the surprise. That's a full episode, Mark?
Yeah.
You're going to go Azul, they look like starbursts. All right, the first topic or mini topic or cannot bear the weight of a full episode topic, but we wanted to talk about it anyway. So the first mini question topic comes to us from, well, I can't say his full email address, Mark.
Yeah, you could do
Jordan.
Do what Nolan does. Starts
Jordan,
with J, ends with gmail.com, whatever.
No,
Jordan.
That's not going to feel good. This comes from Jordan not at gmail.com.
What? It is
I did.
No, what? I don't see what you did.
Now people won't be able to get to him.
Oh, they're not. They're going to be. You're throwing them off Jordan's trail. Jordan's safe.
Yeah, by saying not at Gmail.
Okay.
He wants to hear us talk about what gets us excited about two-player games or what makes a good two-player game. This is a topic we have covered in different ways throughout the show, but we thought it was especially pertinent given we just played Haggis, we just played Star Wars, a deck-building game with a colon in it, and we just played Mocked and O-Mocked. And Mark...
Yeah.
What gets you excited in 2023 about two-player games, or what makes them good?
I think the very first thing, and it's probably like the most shallow reaction I have when it comes to it, but when I know I'm playing a two-player game, I am excited for the fact that a lot of the upkeep is in general going to be low. Yes, the game may take a long time to set up based on the game, but in terms of the rules explanation, you're only going to have to teach it or learn it from one person. There's not like are we all on the same page? Okay, let's move on. There's one person you have to teach, one person that you are going to learn it from if you're the person learning it. And also, in terms of like the lack of downtime, there's no other players that are going to be contributing to the downtime. So it's like I take my action, opponent takes action. So that's one thing. I feel like my ability to like maximize my game time per minute is at its highest when I'm playing a two-player game. We can get to it quicker, and then I'm going to be active more often. So that's like the biggest sort of initial draw for me in a two-player game.
Is that you're going to get more per minute action, more gameplay than any other way.
Yeah, because if we're playing a three-player game or a four-player game or more, it's like, okay, yes, first the rules explanation is going to be longer, theoretically, because we have to make sure everybody understands the game. And then also when we're actually playing the game, if it's not a simultaneous action game, then I'm going to be waiting while other people take their turns. And so just on a very, again, shallow surface level, I know that if I'm playing a two-player game, I'm probably going to get the most sort of bang for my buck in terms of like maximum playtime.
It's really interesting. I think that two-player games don't get me excited that often. Very, very rare. And it's odd because my favorite board game of all time is a two-player. Well, it could be played with more, but Innovation is primarily a two-player game. I think that two-player games are very good at being like peaceful recreations of battle. Okay. Which is to say that like chess is like a knife fight. It's like, well, and I'm sure chess players will disagree, where it's like someone wins.
Right.
Someone cuts the jugular. And I think I predominantly associate two-player games with abstract games, which is maybe not true. But I'm just going to answer the question by what it lacks for me. I find that my favorite type of games are the ones that allow me to poke other players, or in another word, to like flirt with them. And I say that like with a straight face, which is to say that like Innovation allows you to do these moves that are just like ridiculously like funny, and like provocative and pushy, but they aren't necessarily like your okay, the move. Sometimes they are. And in multiplayer games where there's 3 or 4 or 5 people, there's often a lot of that room for jostling and king making and flirting, which is to say that like the play itself is the game. And so I find that two-player games often lack that ability, and they become this like seesaw of death. And I like those games. I think Field of Cloth and Gold recently felt like this for me, where it was just like I was either loving it or I was hating it. I was loving it or I was hating it, but it felt like this like battle. And it didn't feel, for whatever reason, to me to be very playful. And I think this is most commonly associated with like being like like a Timmy?
Right.
The person who cares more about having a big win than they do about like the amount of wins. I don't know that it's exactly the same, but it's more just like I like getting a reaction out of people more than I do just like destroying them, which is what I often associate with two-player games of disparate skill levels, is that Mark and Kellen are playing Hive, and Mark has played 100 games of Hive, and Kellen is about to get his ass whooped.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the sentiment that I have, or that I feel most often with two-player games. Like, I feel like, and this might be the same thing you're saying, but like whenever I go into a two-player game, part of me has a little bit of anxiety because it feels like a one-on-one battle. Like, it feels like the stakes are sometimes raised whenever I play two-player game. Because like if I'm playing a 3 or 4-player game, then like if I don't win, then it was one of 2 other people, so my chances were lessened to begin with. And if I lose, then it's like I lost to these players, both these players, or all 3 of these players, whatever. But when it's like a 2-player game, I feel like there's nowhere to run. Either I'm going to win, or
I'm the loser.
Yeah, right. It wasn't because this other player played suboptimally and I couldn't do anything or whatever, or the cards didn't. It's like I lost because you won, and you won only because I lost. So like that's part of the tension I think that's ratcheted up with me when it comes to two-player games.
Are you saying this is because it's like an ego thing? So I got to let go of the ego, and then I could enjoy the two-player games?
Yeah, no, exactly. It just surprises me that you find, unless I'm misunderstanding, like you find two-player games to have generally less of that feeling for you?
No, that's the only feeling I get.
I see.
I just don't get enough play for... it's like too mathematical or too able to be calculated for whatever reason, where it's like, when I look at, and again, I think all games are to some extent, and that's the hard thing is when you unpack it, it's like, when I find out a game only has 10 turns or 12 turns in it, I'm like, well, like that's not fun. You don't get to go to the village and harvest mangoes for a turn because it wasn't in the service of you the other player. You know what I mean?
Right. There's no room to like play around. Yeah, no, I get that for sure. Yeah. Two-player games, as you sort of mentioned earlier, because of that tend to be more abstract in general, and tend to be, as you also mentioned, like more mathematical, because it's zero sum generally. It's like where you are giving something up, the other player has the opportunity to take it, and vice versa. It's much more like black and white.
Yeah. And I mean, high level chess play, right, is cool because what gambit I'm doing, and like I'm countering that, and like then someone goes off script or whatever. Like I'm not like denying that there could be the fun of that. Every year Isho, I think I should get into Go, because I just feel like some of the like board states just look so inventive to me, or like there are a lot of options as to what's happening, and then I never get there. But I I always think about it, Mark.
Right.
And that's not to say there are a lot of two-player games that I like and own and have and will play. It's just I often gravitate towards other forms of entertainment when it's only two people.
Yeah, I also, well, at least in the past, I have been very, very wary of two-player games. Like, I've stayed away from them. Sort of like the same way that my feelings on solo gaming has gone. Like, I stayed away from solo, I stayed away from two-player, and now I'm much more likely to get into two-player. And one of the things I sort of like about playing multiplayer games, two-player, is, again, it just sort of like often will give me the multiplayer experience, but with much more playing time because I'm not waiting for 3 other players to take their turn or whatever. Like, I think a lot of games nowadays are designed with a two-player variant or just two-player play in mind, and so you get that experience of a multiplayer game but with 2 players. It's not always the case, and I don't like playing games that have like crazy variants where you have to like change things to play 2-player, but I think a lot of times like playing a multiplayer game 2 players will allow you to, again, get it to the table easier and also play for more time because you're not sitting out a lot.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good point that modern Euros especially are all built to be played 4-player, and 2-player is like a huge focal point because there's that subset of the audience that primarily plays 2-player but wants to be able to flex it. Yeah. So like that totally exists, and I would say I've probably played none of those releases in the last 5 years at 2-player.
Right.
Like none of them. I doubt like a single one, because why would I do that? I would feel like I was not playing from the way that I want to play it in the best way for me to enjoy it, I guess.
I think there are also, speaking of multiplayer games that play 2 players, I think there are like some instances where I used to stay away from that situation, like mostly. Like I used to stay away from playing 2-player games, be it solely 2-player games or multiplayer games 2-player. Now there are some games that are multiplayer that I prefer playing 2-player. Like the best example, the most clear one is Azul. Like Azul 2-player versus Azul multiplayer is like such a different game, and I really, really prefer the 2-player Azul just because of how cutthroat it is.
Azul is good at all player counts.
That's true. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's best of 2.
Yeah, but this is the guy that likes Star Wars, the deck building game.
That's true.
All right, let's move on while we're ahead. This was what the whole episode was, the frame with which the episode was built upon. This comes to us from Timothy at not Gmail.
Why? It is at Y7mail, which I've never seen before. Unless Timothy gave us a false email address.
Fake email.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Timothy did give us a false email address because he was ashamed of the question, which is, what is the most edible looking board game the people must know? So I got to say, Mark, even though I knew this question was coming, I've been racking my brain for hours trying to come up with, like, because it can't be a card, right? Like, that's first off the bat. It can't be an illustration. Can't be like...
I think there's one that we have to acknowledge right off the bat is like easy, which is Through the Desert, the pastel camels.
Okay,
what? You're going to say no to this?
I'm going to say way no to this.
What?
Okay, those are really... They're beautiful, but who's ever had a candy shaped like a camel with a little rider on top of it? They look nothing like that just because they're pastel. They do not look edible at all, Mark. I think you're propagating...
Wrong. This is a very common thing that people say.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're saying it, Mark. Have a real thought for once.
Okay, well then...
I have heard that.
Okay.
I have heard that. I feel like Azul often gets cited in some similar ways. Azul also has a new chocolate version.
Oh, which is literally chocolate, right? Is that literally chocolate? Or no, is that...
No. It's just chocolate. Azul Master Chocalatier. And so now the pieces are brown. I don't know. I would not have advised them to go with that as their next product line because it's the same game, just now it's chocolate.
Wasn't there literally like a chocolate Catan? I think there's a chocolate Catan, right? Where you can...
I do think that exists.
I'm going to stay with the pastel thing, and I'm going to say another game that I think would work nice as a dessert if it was placed in front of you would be Pax Pamir 2nd Edition. The big, chunky pastel pieces. They look like little cakes.
Yeah, the logs? Like, what are you going to eat those
it's like
for?
A little cake. It's like a little cake.
Oh, a little cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fondant, right?
It's not fondant. It's like a cake.
Man, I am struggling.
Okay, let's break it down. Let's just break it down, all right?
It's pastel colors.
We know, we know that we're not talking about cards here, right? So what would make for a delicious game to you? It's got to be like colorful, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of trying to come up with a game that had a lot of like fruit in it, right?
Okay. What about the Juicy
No,
Fruits
no.
game recently? Aren't there like fruit-shaped meeples in there? Or fruit-shaped pieces, I
Well,
should say?
because there's that capstone game that came out recently that I thought had really cool components. Juicy Fruit.
That's what I just said. I literally said that 2 seconds ago.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I said what you said. What were you talking about? Juicy Fruits?
Oh, I forgot that the name was called Juicy Fruits because that.
But that's
Yeah.
God, that's a weak answer. You're gonna go with the game that has food in it? Think outside the
No.
box.
I don't know, Mark. This is a hard question to be put on the spot.
Oh, so you're
right?
making
put on
fun
the
of
spot.
making fun of Timothy a second ago for being a dumb question. Now you can't even answer it. What about a game like
What?
Wingspan? I think a lot of games that are just beautiful are going to be ones that Wingspan's colorful. I mean, I don't know what you're going to eat. I guess you could eat the eggs. You have Easter eggs. It's like Easter eggs.
I don't know about this, Mark. Maybe we should cut this.
Well, let's have the listeners at our Discord.
Yeah,
Board
they'll
Game
probably
Barrage-
know.
Yeah, boardgamebarrage.com/Discord in the podcast channel. Let us know what you think are the most edible. I think if you had Pax Pamir 2nd edition in front of you, I think that would look delicious.
That I would agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like I can think about like really beautiful components, but I don't want to eat them.
Okay, so give me an
Do you
example.
understand? Well, I was thinking about like the Zendo pyramids.
Yeah, that works.
But those are like
Yeah, that works.
those are
exactly.
like acrylic plastic. What food does that
Kellen,
look like?
It looks like sugar, like sugar, like yeah.
Oh.
Is that blown sugar? Is that what it's called?
I don't know, Mark. I don't want to know about that.
All right, but yeah, go to
The sooner we
boardgamebarrage.com
move on.
/Discord and tell us what are the most edible.
The most edible looking board game
games. Yeah,
components.
I think the Zendo one was great. I agree with you 100%.
I don't know, Mark. I'm doubting
I could see those pieces being.
I'm doubting even having a board game podcast after this discussion.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think that question is going to KO me out of this episode. So thank you for that. That is going to do it for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, done by one Mark and Kellen. You can find us on all forms of social media at boardgamebarrage.com, boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, our Board Game Geek Guild. We have a Facebook group that none of us ever go to. We have a very active Discord with people who tell us how wrong we are. I was kind of thinking that the most common thing someone says to us is, "You're wrong about."
In the Discord or just.
What do you think about that, Mark?
I don't know. I think we get our share of that, and I think it's usually well deserved. But I think our Discord, if people are thinking that means our Discord is like aggressive, it is 100% not.
Thank you so much to Heart Society Music for their fantastic intro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. Until next time, thank you so much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, and I feel like I have to fill the silence, so I just say more stupid. But before we get to the stupid, Mark will be talking to us about
Power and Weakness and the Star Wars deck building game.
Okay, I'm supposed to repeat that back, or are we're
Doesn't
keeping
matter.
it like
We can
that?
keep it.
You're allowed to introduce your own thing.
I mean,
It's gonna make me look like a poor host.
breaking tradition, but yeah, go ahead, you do it, and this will be a nice outro.
I can't remember the first game, so keep it in. And then I'll be talking about Haggis, an upcoming and beloved two-player. The first topic, or mini topic, or cannot bear the weight of a full episode topic, but we wanted to talk about it anyway, is... I don't. Right after I insulted them, I have to say their name?
Yeah.